Well, the clock is ticking. Come midnight, 28 large debt-ridden companies could face insolvency proceedings if they fail to find a resolution. In fact, sources tell us most of these companies are likely to end up in the National Company Law Tribunal. So what does this mean for banks and, more importantly, for these stressed companies? That is the topic of our Editors' Roundtable today. Joining me now to discuss this issue, Ritu and Latha. Ritu, coming to you first, give us a status check on the companies that could be headed to the NCLT and where their resolution plans currently stand.
Shireen, I'll break it down into, 4 separate categories, and I'll start with the star, among these 28 large accounts that form the second defaulter list of the Reserve Bank of India. First is Videocon Industries. Remember, there's also Videocon Telecom on the list, but Videocon Industries alone forms a bulk of this 1.5 lakh crores of total debt that all of these 28 accounts together hold. The other large account on the list, very prominent by its name, is Jayaprakash Associates, the flagship group of Manoj Gaur, where also there is some contention right now whether or not it will remain in this NCLT list. More on that later. The other big account is Soma Enterprises, also has a fairly large debt, and that is also one of the accounts where resolution perhaps has been found before the closure of the deadline. Now, moving on to the second and more important bit, which is the cases that have been resolved so far. So 4 cases we know from our sources have clearly found resolution before this 13 December deadline ended. The first one, as I mentioned, was Soma Enterprises, where we understand that the Oversight Committee has approved the scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed assets for Soma Enterprises, what is popularly called the S4A scheme. The other accounts that have been resolved include Jaiswal Nico, where a recast plan has been approved by the lenders, also Anaric Aluminium, a much smaller account, but again, where restructuring proposals are in place for the particular company. Built, which is Balarpur Industries, where we understand the account was sold to asset reconstruction companies. So that is also pretty much in the clear. Now comes the interesting bit, which is the grey areas on these 28 accounts. First one that I mentioned earlier, as well as Jayaprakash Associates. What has really happened is a resolution plan was already in place for Jayaprakash Associates even before the second list was disclosed, where both the board of the company and the Joint Lender Forum had approved a recast scheme. Therefore, the lead bank in the consortium, that is ICICI Bank, went to the regulator and asked for a special dispensation, where it asked the regulator to keep JPA out of the second NCLT list so that they could avoid the whole process of going through that, getting approval for that recast package once again when it is already in place. The second is SR Projects. Very interestingly, we understand that, somehow it has been able to cough up some money at the very last minute because of some repayments that were due to the company, and is currently negotiating a settlement with the lenders so that it can keep itself out of this NCLT list. But there again, we don't think that any resolution has been reached so far. If there is an update, we'll bring you one. And the last one is Uttam Galva, where some ad hoc resolution plan is in place, and a rating, a standard rating has been given to the company, which could help keep it out of that NCLT list. But for the rest of them, it looks like they are headed to the bankruptcy court with a 180-day timeline within which they have to resolve the case, or they end up in liquidation.
Okay, Ritu. So, Latha, as we just heard from Ritu there, it looks like most of these cases will, in fact, end up at the Company Law Tribunal. Let's talk about the impact for banks, Latha.
Okay, well, I just want to add one word to what Ritu was saying. Just picking up from bankers that they're also desperately trying to keep Videocon out of the getting into the bankruptcy court list. Trying. The Reserve Bank's conditions are very clear. Unless you get an investment grade rating, you cannot keep it out of NCLT. So they have to really extend a 5-year loan into a 30-year loan to be able to make it even look like investment grade. So efforts are on for JPA, Videocon and even Jaiswal to keep it out, because that will mean saving about 75,000 crores out of a total of 1,30,000 crores that these 28 cases amount to. Okay, that said, let me just come to what is the provisioning impact. The second defaulters list, that is this 28, actually remains underprovided by about 40 basis points of this 1,30,000 crores. So, we can count that to be about something like about 5,000 crores or thereabouts. Still more need to be provided. Now, RBI, of course, RBI's mandate is 50% has to be provided for. I've just giving you the bank-wise breakup. The one that needs least cover are Axis and Yes. For them, only 0.1% of the total loan book is needed. So for Axis, that will work out to about 4,000 crore of provisioning more is needed. Then they are up to speed on these 28 cases, or maybe 24, if 4 of them actually escape. For PNB and BOI, that is the next best list of cases. It is 0.2% of their book. Now, I can't offhand remember the total book of PNB and BOI, but it might work out to something like 10,000 crore more needed for PNB, and maybe about 6,000, 8,000 needed for BOI. The next come BOB and Indian Bank. They need 0.3% of their total loan book to be provided for. And then comes SBI, which needs 0.4% of its book yet to be provided for. And ICICI, which needs 0.5%. All these are Credit Suisse calculations. And Central Bank, of course, requires a ton more of provisioning. That's the total. I'll give you the overall picture as well. RBI's list, the first list accounted, the 12 cases accounted for 2.8% of the total loans of the system and 26% of the NPAs. Okay. The second list accounts for 16% of the NPAs, and the total of the two account for 42% of the NPAs. So a substantial portion of the NPAs get taken care of if they are provided. So half the battle won. Let's look at it positively.
All right, Latha and Ritu, we will wait till tomorrow to get final clarity on what is headed to the NCLT. But as both Latha and Ritu were pointing out, it looks like a bulk of these 28 cases will be headed to the bankruptcy court. Thanks very much for joining us on the Editor's Roundtable.